Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we are roaring, or maybe I should say limping, towards a major state budget crisis. Two of the state's leading journalists are here to talk about that, and then Michael Love will get into energy prices. You've been to the pumps, gasoline, it's going up. What about electric rates? All of that and more following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. But before we get into it, I want to thank our viewers around the state, and especially our viewers in the capital region, where we are #1 in our time spot. #1, 12th year this program has been on the air, plus more viewers in Face the Nation, more viewers in This Week with George Stephanopoulos, more viewers than Fox News Sunday. It's all about you. And across the table from me, two of the state's leading journalists are in the house to talk about, oh man, the budget. First of all, Brad Bumsted. He is a reporter and a columnist with the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. Robert Swift with Times-Shamrock newspapers. Did I finally get that right? Both of them do something with the F&M poll, Franklin and Marshall College poll. All right. I want to start with you, Brad. Before we get into the budget, which I know you guys have been covering, Tom Corbett, the Attorney General, had a case against Mike Veon, the former #2 guy among the Democrats in the House, charged that his economic development nonprofit corporation, well, that was involved in public corruption. It was thrown out. What's that all about?
Well, he actually has two cases against Mike Veon.
Right.
One is on Bonusgate, and the separate one is on the Beaver Initiative for Growth, a group that ostensibly was doing economic development in Beaver County. Mike Veon, when he was the #2 leader in the State House, got about $10 million over 10 years for this tiny nonprofit. He was the co-chair of that group and decided how to spend the money. He had no board of directors. Right. The Attorney General's office alleges that he diverted millions of dollars for his own political use and personal benefit as well. Mm-hmm. Not that he took money, but that it was for his personal benefit. And prosecutors were stunned recently when a district justice in Harrisburg, Joseph Solomon, dismissed all the charges against Veon and his aide, Anna Marie Peretta Rosepink. And people were scratching their heads. How could this be? What's going to happen in this is the Attorney General's office is going to refile and may have done so by the time this airs. And they are going to be petitioning to have a different judge. It turns out Justice Solomon had ties to some of the Democratic defendants in Bonusgate, the other case, who allegedly were directed by Veon in that case. And he knew some of the witnesses like Jeff Foreman. And there's some question as to whether he should have even heard it because he recused himself in the Bonusgate
case. In the Bonusgate, but not this.
His position is, well, he doesn't really know Veon and Rosepink. He knew the other people, but not them.
I got it. All right. Look, you're the historian among the journalists. Virtually unprecedented to have the state's leading prosecutor, is that one way to put it, the Attorney General, have a case thrown out? Do you know? I mean, that's...
You know, once again, Corbett has been taking on a new role for an elected Attorney General by going after this case. Now, I think the thing is the next time that he stands before cameras and announces a new round of indictments related to Bonusgate, which you've been told will happen, that's where, you know, some of the fallout from this dismissal will come. People will be looking at his face and his mannerisms and probably asking him, how do you know these charges won't be thrown out? That's where I think the crux of the thing will fall.
Yeah, and now, when we looked at the presentment, let's go back to Bonusgate. For those of you 12, two legislators, now former legislators, 10 staffers, Democratic staffers, you know, were involved in grand jury presentment, said there was evidence to indict them. A couple of them have made some deals, I guess, but there will be trials for most of them. Brad, do you think this is going to play out and affect those trials? I don't see any relationship, but maybe
no, I don't think so, because it's most likely by the time that those cases go to trial that Veon and Rosepink will have already been bound over for court by a different district justice.
I got it.
So this will be a thing in the past. However, there's no mistaking it was a blow to Corbett's office, and there's also no doubt in my mind that Corbett's office could have presented the case better. Look, what happens in a preliminary hearing is prosecutors go in and try to present the minimal amount of evidence to meet a low standard to have someone held over. So they hold a lot back. Well, you can bet the next time there's a hearing, they won't be holding back. They held too much back. They weren't as prepared. I think that one or two of the witnesses they didn't have control over and didn't know exactly what they were going to say, which is a no-no for any lawyer. And these are experienced prosecutors.
Yeah.
Tony Krastik, who's leading the case for the Attorney General, is one of the, he's the real deal. He's one of the better prosecutors in the state. But I think they maybe took it too lightly, and Solomon had reason to dismiss some of them, but not others.
We're going to run to a break, but before we do, and I'm going to come back to you, Robert, on the budget, is this interfering at all the so-called bonus, the bonus gate prosecutions? There was this concern that somehow this would play out in the daily activities of the legislature because it's expected that there will be additional indictments of, this time, Republicans. Is that playing out at all in the legislature?
It's like people waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
They've been waiting a long time for that other shoe to drop. But as far as the legislature taking up issues and voting, it has not had an effect. But there's a sense of anticipation, dread of what could come next.
All right. Well, a lot of folks in Harrisburg are not planning a vacation in July, at least in early July, as it is expected. That's a state budget debate. We'll once again move on into July. The deadline is June 30. Constitution says we're supposed to have a budget adopted by the legislature and signed into law by the governor. We will see, and we will see you after this break.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by PAConstructionJobs.com. For more information about rewarding careers in the highway construction industry, visit PAConstructionJobs.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back with Robert Swift and Brad Bumsted, two of the state's leading journalists. We're chatting about, now we're going to turn to the state budget. All right, Robert, you covered a lot of these. June 30, there's about, what, $1.5 billion difference between the governor and Senate. Go ahead, you tell the story.
There's one thing that we're coming back, but the legislature has been out most of May, so people should be aware of that. They've been on recess. So they're coming back now for what's the lead-up month, busiest time of year for them. This is looking exceedingly, I think, grim as far as a resolution of this budget crisis, trying to bridge a $3 billion revenue gap that could even go higher.
So there's a projected deficit of $3 billion for this year, just to get it. Go ahead.
And then what they call, people talk about the structural deficit, what the deficit for the next fiscal year, which they cannot ignore. They got to deal with that. Now, it's getting down between a battle between Senate Republicans, no tax hikes, no revenue increases at all, and the Rendell administration and House Democrats warning about drastic cuts in programs and services. And to my mind, it's just going to be a lot of, at this point, we are looking at payless paydays for state employees, not the furloughs of 2 years ago where services get shut down. But to me, it looks like there's going to be a lot of pain, a lot of grief, a lot of angst before anything's done. But
Governor Rendell has said, Brad, that they'll get paid after the fact. They may not get paid at the beginning, but he said they're not going to be held hostage, I guess.
Right.
We're talking now about 75 or 80,000 state employees. That may be more than there are. Go ahead.
But in a tough economy, if you've got to pay your credit card bill at the end of the month, getting paid later doesn't always work that well for you.
6 weeks, 2 months.
Yeah, it's a really tough thing, but it's as RB described, and the key issue is going to be, of course, the governor has proposed some minor tax increases.
Yeah.
Let's call it that for now anyway in his budget, but that doesn't really close the gap. The deficit started out at about $1.6 billion in December when they started talking about it. This week, the House Appropriations Committee said it's $3.2 billion.
Oh, now it's over $3 billion.
Yes, and that's $300 million higher than the Senate budget that was passed. So there's a gap an additional gap that they weren't even planning on. So now it comes down to whether they're willing to raise a broad-based tax like the income tax to try to deal with this, and Representative Evans' office raised that this week.
And we've had, in the past several recessions, what has happened?
The state has gone to the personal and corporate income tax, hiked it, then also had a clause where it would revert. They could vote to, to revert the tax to the previous level a year or two later when things straighten out. But what's happened since the Republicans passed their budget in early May, this is some unprecedented. The Rendell administration has launched quite an attack on that budget. Cabinet officials, Republicans have not been in town.
Calling it heartless and cruel, and I mean that's pretty strong language, and it's been coming out of Harrisburg in a whole variety. Is that going to make? But he also said, Governor Rendell also said that he could be willing to come down a bit this week from the whatever it is, $29.5 billion, if I got that right. Brad, is that his indication he's willing to bend a little bit?
Yeah, and I think he is going to have to try to do that because it's all going to come down to the Senate. The Senate is controlled by Republicans. Right. The new sheriff in town, Joe Scarnati, the president pro tem, has said no taxes of any sort in this budget. None, zero. But the key question then becomes, can a coalition of the House Democrats and the governor combine with a handful of Republican senators in the Senate, along with the Senate Democrats, push something through? It's the coalition that got gambling through in 2004.
But boy, voting for a budget against your own party's wishes within the Republican caucus in the Senate is not going to be an easy thing. I mean, you're right, that may be the only way, but typically there would be a deal made between Republicans and Democrats where the party in the minority would provide some votes so that the party in power doesn't have to take the full blame for the taxes. You're a historian.
Right. And it's a question of just how long can they go on in this before the pressure for a compromise, they can't ignore it, where so many breaks. And historically, you haven't gone for a full-fledged solution beyond the first week of August.
The interesting thing is that leaders in the chambers have been typically the ones who will throw in the tax votes. Look, it's an institutional decision to go forward. We have to do this as leaders. But the problem in the Senate is that Scarnati can't do it, and Jane Orey, the majority whip, can't do it. She's absolutely opposed to any tax increases. Comes down to Senator Pileggi, who's from that southeast area. Will he, move to that direction?
Lead a few of his colleagues in the southeast.
I think that's where it's at.
All right, great update. Gasoline prices are going up. What about electricity? It's time for our energy update. Michael Love is here. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Joining me as often is the case when we have these discussions about energy is Michael Love. He's the president of the Energy Association of Pennsylvania. Michael, as always, welcome.
Good to be here, Terry.
All right, I want to get to gasoline prices. Here we are. Summer, they're going up in the middle of recession. I know you'll explain that. We've got natural gas prices and electric prices, all of which are in some process of flux. And we want to get to the reason why. But first, $16 to $18 billion in stimulus money. $1 billion or so going into certain infrastructure projects, particularly roads and bridges. You have a concern that you want to draw folks' attentions to, and that is the need for replacement, just simple things in people's homes like gas line replacement. Nothing anyone's going to think about, but why should we care about that?
Well, you should care about it for a variety of reasons. When you see natural gas pipeline like this, it was put in 50 to 70 years ago. And we have, sadly, 13,000 miles of this pipeline in the state. And connected to it, we have 1 million service lines that go up and serve people's houses from the street that are just as old and decrepit, and the customer owns them. Only in Pennsylvania is that the case, and it's the case for 1 million of our customers, primarily in New York.
So 1 million, let me get this straight, 1 million Pennsylvanians have something like that, you think, in not all in that condition, but a lot of it in that condition?
In their front yards. In their front yards,
and it's whose responsibility to replace that?
Right now, for those in western and central Pennsylvania, for the most part, it is the customer's responsibility. And we have a bill pending where we're trying to replace this pipe and take over the responsibility and replace that service line.
Now you say in other states, it's whose responsibility in other states?
The utility, as it is in Philadelphia and the eastern part of the United States. But many, many years ago, this was grandfathered into our statute that certain parts of the state would keep the customer responsible for the pipe. And that's a law that's long overdue to be changed.
So what you want to do is you want to use some of the stimulus money that Congress, you know, the $780 billion, it's so big I can't hardly talk about it, $780 billion in stimulus money. Some of the 16 to 18 billion that will come to our state, some of it you want to put.
Actually, we don't want any of the stimulus.
No stimulus. How are you going to pay for it then?
Well, what we want to be able to do is think about this. We know we're going to have $1 billion, $1.5 billion of water projects. Water lines lie right underneath gas lines in the street. And we want to be able to replace these gas lines when they're replacing the water lines. Part of the stimulus package.
Okay, so the stimulus is involved in it in one way, because it'll do the water replacement, and then you'll replace these. Well, that's pretty smart. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
And then we also don't...
But why should we talk about something sensible? But go ahead.
Well, and the other thing is we could share the paving costs. Yeah. When you start digging in the street, 60% of the cost is in paving. Now, you ask any business, any homeowner, they don't want to see their street torn up. And they certainly don't want to see it torn up twice or 3 times.
Amen.
So what we're trying to do in York is the perfect example. In York, the mayor, York Water, Columbia Gas have been working together to replace pipe, and then the street is pristine, the water pipe is new, the gas pipe is new, and the savings is incredible. We pay $60 a ton for paving normally.
No.
We're paying $10 a ton down in York.
All right, before we get out of this segment, then we'll come back, we'll talk about gas, these prices and what's going on with them. Is this a hazard, a potential hazard?
It's not a hazard today, but it certainly is a potential hazard down the road.
Okay.
And so what we're saying is, let's address it now. It makes sense to address it. The stimulus dollars are already going to be opening up the street. Yep. Let's address it now. House Bill 744.
Smart idea.
We're trying to get it done.
I'm supposed to be neutral, but this sounds like a win-win for everybody.
It's a win for the customers, and it's at a time when natural gas prices are way down. So a small surcharge on the bill, which is how we would pay for it, is going to be lost in what is normally the case. People are paying 25 to 30% lower than they did last year on gas.
Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, it's summertime. We all know what happens to energy. Some energy prices go up. We're going to explore that with Mike Love following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back with Mike Love from the Energy Association of Pennsylvania. All right, gasoline prices are up. There's been some reports about it, but not a lot. typical, right? This is sort of normal, isn't it?
It is normal for gasoline prices to go up in the summer. It's surprising that they're going up as significant as they are given the recession and the rollback that people are doing and not driving as much.
Yeah.
In contrast, natural gas prices are at their lowest in decades.
Wow.
Anybody that's out there looking to build a home or whatever is probably looking at natural gas as the cheaper alternative. Electric rates, a mixed bag. Everybody's wondering what's going to happen when rate caps come off. And the answer is it's not going to be the same for everybody. If rate caps came off today, PECO's rates would go down by 8%.
Right.
If rate caps were put in today, PPLs might go up by 20 or 30%.
Yeah. Now, I did that pay in advance. My wife's taking care of that. I'm not, but
so did I.
We signed up for that. Was that a good thing to do?
I think it was an excellent thing
now,
to
by
do.
the way, I'm going to let Mike explain what that is for our
What it is you
viewers.
pay a little bit more now, and that little extra you're paying more towards, it gets to be acted as a credit towards your bill later on.
Okay.
Plus, PPL pays you interest at 6%.
Yeah.
And anybody go to a bank today, and they know they can't get anywhere near 3, let alone 6. So it's a good deal. And again, another thing that has to be put in mind, when you look at Pennsylvania versus the other, say, 10 or 11 largest states, we are somewhere between 19 and 21% lower, whether it's residential, commercial, or industrial.
Just for electric?
Electric. Than we are in the other states. If you were in New York, you'd be paying 70% more than you're paying in Pennsylvania. If you were in New Jersey, you'd be paying 60% more. In California, 40% more. Again, so while we've had this rate cap going on, the rest of the world has been upping electric prices. And as I said before, we've had some success stories. Pittsburgh. When Pittsburgh, the rate caps came off, what rates went down? It all depends on how high the rates are going in.
Right.
And if your rate is low and it goes up by 20%, is that worse than having high rates that go down by 5%?
When you paid higher rates over the years. Yeah. Now, before I let you go, one of the things that we've had folks on the show, and you've done this too, is we need to be much more energy conscious in our own homes and work on conservation more with smart meters. Is that still sort of a major push?
It is a huge push by the electric industry, by the administration, by the legislature.
And by environmentalists. You think
and
that's
environmentalists
one place everybody
as well.
agrees on.
And think about it. We're sitting here today saying, you know, if you would just adjust your energy usage by 3-4%.
Yeah, good point.
Just by that small amount. And how could you do it? You don't have to leave your TV plugged in when you go on vacation. Smart thermostat. Easy to do.
Yep. Thanks, as always. Great update. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.